The Gauntlet is one of my favorite activities in the entire game of old school RuneScape. It's a challenging and fun solo experience that can earn you an average of between 1 and 4 mil an hour, and even better loot if you can complete the challenge mode. But this guide is going to focus on the normal, non-corrupted version. Lore-wise, the Gauntlet is a training ground created by the Amlod clan to help train the Prifddinas elves and ensure they could defend the city during the God Wars. However, some elves still seem to prefer just beating the crap out of each other. This minigame was recently updated and it's now easier than ever, so there's never been a better time to learn how to complete it. And you've come to the best place to do so. Before we get started though, be warned that this is a dangerous minigame. If you die while inside as a hardcore Iron Man, you'll lose your hardcore status. Also, a death in the Gauntlet will clear any items held in death coffers or gravestones or by NPCs at Vorkath and Zulrah and whatnot. In order to attempt the Gauntlet, you have to have completed Song of the Elves, making this one of the more late game activities. One awesome thing about this activity is that even pures can do it. But while you don't need defense levels to wear the armor inside the dungeon, you should have pretty high offensive stats. If you're a pure and have under 85 attack or so, you should have at least around 85 magic and ranged. At least 43 prayer is also essential. Personally, I'd recommend having at least 85 attack and strength, ranged, and magic because it'll make your life a lot easier. 70 plus prayer and defense for piety also really comes in handy. Rigor and augury would be great too, but they're not really necessary. The portal to get to this place is in the northwestern part of Prifddinas. The easiest ways to get there are to either run from the house portal if your player-owned house is in the city, or use a crystal teleport seed and run northwest. Once inside, you have to talk to this guy Bryn over here before you can attempt to run. He'll explain what the Gauntlet is about, but he's a little bit vague and kinda just sends you to your death. So let me explain. The goal of the Gauntlet, and the only way to get the good loot, is to kill the crystalline Hunlif. It's a level 674 boss that's based on a deadly wolf-like predator from the elves' homeworld of Tardiad. He has 600 hit points and 240 defense, meaning he's pretty tough to kill. Since you can't bring anything into this minigame, you have to gather resources and food and craft armor and weapons to help you in the fight. This makes it a pretty dang good bank rebuild activity. It's also one of the most profitable combat training methods in the game since you get 100% of the normal combat XP. When you enter the Gauntlet, you'll start out with the same basic supplies every time, a crystal pickaxe, axe, harpoon, and scepter which you'll use to gather resources. You'll also get a pestle and mortar and a crystal teleport seed that returns you to the home room. The home room contains helpful things too, a crystal singing bowl where you craft all your items, a range to cook food on, and a water pump to fill vials at. There's also lecterns for crystal singing recipes and for Agnial potion information, but you can review these in the entry room for the Gauntlet so you don't have to waste precious time inside if you want to review the information. The tool storage inside the Gauntlet spawn room allows you to withdraw any of the starting items except for the teleport crystal in case you accidentally got rid of yours and need it again. And lastly, there's a teleport platform should you wish to leave the Gauntlet before defeating the crystalline Hunlif. Some of the resources you need will have to be gathered by killing monsters. There are 3 different tiers of monsters inside the Gauntlet. Tier 1 consists of low-level monsters, the crystalline spider, rat, and bat, which can be found in any room in the dungeon aside from the home and boss room in any amount between 1 and 3. They only have 12 to 14 hit points, and they're a bit of a nuisance on an account with high defense, but at lower defense levels they're quite menacing. I've seen these guys hit up to 8 damage, so protect from melee might be necessary while running past them on low defense accounts. These tier 1 monsters drop several things you'll need to fight the Hunlif. They always drop between 10 and around 37 crystal shards, which are extremely important as they're the currency used to craft everything inside the Gauntlet. They can also drop raw paddlefish, which heal 20 hit points when cooked. You can also get a teleport crystal from them, which are handy because they bring you back to the home room that you start in. The Grim Leaf they occasionally drop is also useful because you need them to make the Agnial potions, which are basically a prayer potion, double super energy, and stamina potion combined. But the most important item on their loot table is the weapon frame. You need these to create weapons, and you'll need at least 2 different weapons crafted from them for the final fight. The weapon frames are a pretty common drop, but in case you have bad RNG, you're guaranteed to get a frame on your third kill of a tier 1 monster if you haven't gotten one elsewhere. The tier 2 monsters are the crystalline unicorn, scorpion, and wolf, and like the lower level monsters, they can be found anywhere. These guys are higher level than the tier 1s and they have the same drops, but they drop more crystal shards. They hit much more accurately and higher than the tier 1 beasts, so using prayer to run by them is always a good idea. It's usually worth it to kill 1 or 2 of these as you run around looking for mini-bosses. Unlike the lower level monsters, they always spawn in pairs and they drop a weapon frame on your first kill if a frame hasn't been dropped already. Tier 3 beasts are demi-bosses, the crystalline bear, dragon, and dark beast, all at level 172 combat. As of July 2nd, they only spawn in the center 3 rooms in the outer ring in both versions of the Gauntlet. They all drop the same things as the lower tier monsters, but each mini-boss has its own unique item. The item each one drops resembles their attack style. Crystalline dragons use magic, so the crystal orb they drop is used to create the crystal staff. The dark beast uses ranged, and it drops the crystalline bowstring needed to create the crystal bow. Lastly, the bear uses melee and drops a crystal spike needed for the halberd. However, if you already have the item that one mini-boss drops, it will drop one of the other 2 weapon attachments instead. All 3 of these guys can smack you pretty freaking hard, so you'll need to pray against them accordingly. Also, as of April 8th, 2020, every mini-boss will always drop a weapon frame, so that's pretty nice. Alright, that's all the resource monsters covered. Now for the other types of resources. To make armor, you're going to need to gather materials from the various hotspots around the dungeon and have enough crystal shards. There are 3 different materials used for armor: friend bark, crystal ore, and linum tyrannum. While harvesting all types of resource in the dungeon, you have a decent chance of finding crystal shards. So you have 2 ways to gather shards inside the gauntlet. For each piece of armor, you'll need 1 of each material and 40 crystal shards for tier 1, meaning you'll need 3 crystal ore, 3 friend bark, 3 linum tyrannum, and 120 crystal shards for a set of basic armor. Of course, there are also 3 different tiers of armor. The number 3 seems to pop up a lot in this activity. Anyway, the higher the tier of armor you create, the more damage it blocks and the better offensive stats and prayer bonus you'll have. As of July 2nd, 2020, Tier 2 and Tier 3 armor require less materials than they did initially. Instead of needing 2 of each resource plus basic armor for every piece of Tier 2, you now need only 1 of each material for the helm and legs, bringing the total down to 7 of each resource and 300 shards for full Tier 2 armor. But you can forget about making Tier 3 armor because making it is a complete waste of time and nobody uses it. The second to last resource that we haven't really talked about yet is the fishing spot. It's pretty self-explanatory. You fish in it to get raw paddlefish so you can have food for the final fight. Each hotspot contains 4 paddlefish, which heal 20 hit points each. And also due to that July 2nd update, paddlefish are now cooked once per tick automatically, whereas previously you had to spam click the range to cook them at that speed. Thanks, Jagex! And finally, the last resource, the Grim Root. You can pick 1 Grim Leaf from this hotspot, which will make 1 Agnial potion when combined with a vial of water and 10 crystal dust. Crystal dust is just 10 crystal shards ground up with your pestle and mortar. We've now covered everything in the dungeon except for what's in the middle, the crystalline Hunlif. So let's talk about that thing. The crystalline Hunlif has 2 primary attack styles, ranged and magic. It alternates between them every 4 attacks, but he always starts the fight using ranged. Another easy escape perk of the July 2nd update is that the Hunlif will now show an animation after its 4th attack of the same style to let you know it's changing styles with enough time to change a prayer. So now you don't have to count his attacks, but it does help keep you ready for the style changes. Additionally, this boss will change his prayer on every 6th attack of yours, provided that he's not already praying against it. If you attack it with the style that it's praying against, the attack isn't counted toward its next prayer change. However, every attack of yours that's different than the style the Hunlif is praying against counts regardless of whether it's successful or not. The prayer he switches to matches the weapon that you use on the 6th correct attack. So if you mage him 5 times and then range him, he'll switch to protect from missiles. This mechanic can actually be used to get faster completion times, but we'll go over that later. The Hunlif's ranged attack is a group of small crystal-looking things, and magic is a large blue lightning-y orb. However, the Hunlif will occasionally fire a slightly darker and smaller prayer-disabling attack during its magic phase. He usually does this once per magic phase, but it's possible for him to skip it or, on rare occasions, do it twice. The attack makes a pretty distinct sound, so it's hard to miss if you've got your sound on. This prayer draining orb counts as one of the 4 attacks during the magic phase. One thing that does not count toward one of his 4 attacks per phase is when the Hunlif stomps you. If you run underneath him and he can't hit you by the time his next attack is supposed to happen, he'll stomp and deal between 8 and somewhere around 45 damage, so try to avoid running through him. The last attack up the boss's sleeve is the Tornado Stomp Special. After between 4 and 10 normal counted attacks of his, he'll stand up and stomp the ground, creating annoying tornadoes that follow you around. This special also counts toward his 4 hits per style. In the beginning of the fight, only 1 tornado will spawn, but you still have to do your best to avoid it reaching you. Every tornado phase will last for 4 attacks from the Hunlif. Once the tornadoes despawn, it'll be another 4 to 10 hits before he stomps again. This is where RNG really plays a role in the difficulty of your fight. If he keeps stomping every 4 to 5 normal attacks, it doesn't leave you much time to do damage, and your fights take a lot longer since you're constantly on the run. Near the end of the fight, 3 tornadoes will spawn, so it really makes the final phase kinda stressful. Here's the table for how much damage each one will do based on your armor. The damage here is per tick and per tornado, so you really want to avoid these things by any means necessary. If you have nowhere to go but through the boss and you have 2 or 3 tornadoes coming after you, it's best to just run through him. But try to time it right by running right after one of his attacks. These things are pretty tricky to navigate and their behavior is hard to understand. But in general, try to avoid running through them because they'll often damage you if you do. If you have no other safe routes though, wait until there's only a 1 square gap and then run through the tornado. If done right, you can avoid all damage. Just try not to let them catch up to you though, because even a slight lag when 3 tornadoes are stacked can bring your gauntlet run to a miserable end. That's the boss mechanics covered, now let's go over the room itself. The ground is made of distinct tiles, and about 3 seconds after you enter the room, some of them are going to light up in a specific pattern. The highlighted tiles will be safe while they're blue, but they'll deal some hefty damage when they turn orange. So you have to avoid standing on them while fighting the Hunlif. At the start of the fight, you have a pretty good window of time to run to a new spot, about 4 seconds, and you can usually pull off 1 more hit before doing so. Once the Hunlif has about 1/3 of its health left, however, you only have about half as much time to get to a new tile, so you need to run as soon as the tiles turn blue. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, on top of the tile patterns changing, you have to evade the tornadoes too. Now this next section with details of the tile patterns isn't really necessary to remember, but it'll help your boss fights go a little bit smoother. I wanted to know if there are spots in the boss room that are safer to stand in, so I did a few test runs of the boss and painstakingly mapped out every single tile pattern that pops up. It turns out there are. By layering every pattern on top of each other, we can see that the most dangerous places to stand are at the corners and in the direct center of the room. The safest places, shown by the lighter tiles, are the squares directly in front of the doors up to the 4th tile away. Personally, I'd recommend standing in a tile 4 spots out from any door because it's a lot easier to get away from most dangerous tile layouts in these spots. In fact, if one of these 8 squares is about to burn, you'll never be more than 2 squares from safety. But don't pick one of these spots that's close to the crystalline Hunlif, try to be as far away from it as you can so you have room to run around. The tiles I just showed you are theoretically the safest places, but that's assuming that each pattern shows up with the same consistency for the whole fight. Theory is never good enough for me, so I went ahead and did a total of 10 full test runs. I mapped out the first 13 patterns because that was the lowest amount of tile changes in all my fights to find out for real which place was the safest. The pattern maps of all the fights generally confirm the theory about the overall safest places to be. So nothing new there, but I did learn a couple other things which aren't really necessary to know, but hey, we might as well try to minimize our fight times, right? So it turns out that there are 3 phases in the fight with the crystalline Hunlif. Phase 1 is when the Hunlif is above 400 hit points. During Phase 1, the room will only create what we'll call easy tile patterns. These are the single 6x6 squares and 4x12 rectangles which will create 36 and 48 dangerous tiles respectively. The Hunlif's Stomp special will only spawn 1 tornado in this first phase. Since these tile patterns are all one continuous shape and you don't lose much space to run on, they're pretty easy to avoid stepping on even when the tornadoes are chasing you. Nevertheless, let's look at the mapping for the easy patterns. After including every possible position of both patterns, we can see that the safest place during this easy phase are the 4x2 rectangles centering in front of each door. I'd recommend standing on the second row away from the door in case a 4x12 rectangle pops up underneath you. Phase 2 begins when the boss is under 400 hit points. The Hunlif will now spawn 2 tornadoes at once and 1 new tile pattern shows up, the 3x12 dual rectangles that can either be on the north and south or east and west sides of the room. The room seems to use about half medium and half easy patterns during this phase. Looking at the density map for Phase 2, the safest spots still haven't changed from Phase 1. This segment can be kind of difficult if the boss is standing near the middle of the room because you're not left with much space to run from the tornadoes when the 3x12 rectangles show up. Phase 3 starts when the Hunlif is below 200 hit points and it's the hardest part of the fight by far. 3 tornadoes will now spawn on the Stomp special attack and 4 new tile patterns will start showing up. These hard patterns can make it extremely difficult to safely evade the 3 tornadoes because you're confined to small sections and often have to make tight turns. With just a tiny bit of lag or slow clicking, all 3 tornadoes can hit you and deal around 40 damage per tick that they're on top of you. Luckily though, this layout is actually a good one because you can easily gain distance from the tornadoes and attack the boss from the perimeter of the room. I did notice that during Phase 3, the room definitely prefers creating the hard tile patterns almost exclusively. So if we just include those, we can see that the safest places to be are the 3rd and 4th tiles away from any door. I'd recommend choosing one of the 4th tiles away from a door since it's easier to escape in these spots. Well, that concludes RuneScape Burning Tornado and Tile Theory, and we've officially covered everything in the Gauntlet. Let's get a quick recap. The Gauntlet contains various low to high level monsters that drop essential things like crystal shards and weapon frames. You can use these drops to create upgraded weapons and achieve higher damage per second to increase your chances of killing the final boss, the crystalline Hunlif. Mini-bosses residing in the middle 3 rooms of the perimeter of the dungeon drop unique items needed to upgrade your weapon to the perfected tier. Also scattered throughout the dungeon are resource hotspots that you can use to create armor, potions, and food. These will be needed to endure and win the boss fight, which consists of 3 increasingly difficult phases. Tornadoes, orange tiles, and running underneath the Hunlif should be avoided at all costs. There are relative safe spots in the boss room that will turn orange less often and can help your fight go a little smoother. Now that we've had an overview of the Gauntlet, I'd like to show an example boss fight to help hammer the information home. Walking up to the door, I can see that the Hunlif is using Protect from ranged, so I already have the correct weapon equipped. He always attacks with ranged first, so I flip that prayer on and my offensive prayer. After just a few seconds, the first tile pattern shows up, so I'm going to step into a Phase 1 safe spot. After the boss's 4th attack, I switch my prayer to Protect from magic. My 6th attack is right after his 4th, so the Hunlif switches to Protect from magic, and in turn, I switch to my bow and turn on Eagle Eye. The boss does his first Hulk Stomp, which will only produce 1 tornado since he's still above 400 hit points. My internet is pretty shaky during the day, so I'm going to gain some distance from the tornado before attacking again. As the tornado disappears, I can relax a little bit and get back to the safe spot. However, Tornado Boy does another stomp after the absolute minimum 4 attacks following the previous tornado phase. I've been pretty unlucky with that so far, but we're still just barely in phase 1, so we only have to deal with one cyclone. As I knock him below 400 hit points, I'm now in phase 2, but I'm not getting any medium tile patterns. At least the tiles are being good to me. His third stomp special is happening during phase 2, so I'm going to eat up a bit because of the increased difficulty. I accidentally run under the boss, but it works out because he went farther back toward the wall and doesn't stop me due to the timing. Just before the tornadoes go away, I knock the boss below 200 hit points, which means I'm entering phase 3. The first tile pattern I get is a hard one, so I get to a good phase 3 safe spot. I'm safe there for a few attacks until the Hunlift releases his final batch of tornado bebes. There's 3 now, so I have to be extra careful to not let them touch me. Once they dissipate, I can just head back to the safe spot and relax until the boss is dead. This fight was pretty easy because of the good positioning of the Hunlift and the fact that the tornadoes almost never combined with a difficult tile pattern. But my reward was a load of patootie. Alright, let's finally move on. Before we get into strategy, let's talk about clients. I highly recommend using OS Buddy when doing the Gauntlet, especially as a beginner. It has a helper that, once you open a new room, shows on the minimap what resources are inside. It can save you a couple seconds per room since you don't have to zoom out and rotate the camera. RuneLite does have a couple community-made plugins for the Gauntlet, and they're decently handy, but neither of them currently show hotspots on the minimap. If you don't have and don't want to get OS Buddy, that's totally fine. Thanks to that July 2nd update, the inner ring of rooms in the normal Gauntlet is now less randomized, and they'll always contain the same basic materials needed to move on to the rest of the dungeon. This means that in every Gauntlet run, the ring centering around the boss room, which is always in the center of the map, contains at least 2 rooms with 3 tier 1 monsters each, and rooms with at least 3 resource nodes for each armor material. I used to suggest scouting a good dungeon layout for first-time Gauntlet learners, but thanks to this update, you don't even need to anymore. And with full tier 2 armor only requiring 7 of each resource, it makes my beginner strategy a lot easier. What we want to do is enter one of the rooms that lies in the inner ring. Pick a room that's directly diagonal from the boss room and it'll be in the correct area. If you find resources for armor, harvest them until you have 7 of that type, and if you find 3 tier 1 monsters, kill them until you get a weapon frame. Make sure to pick up all the crystal shards and a maximum of 2 Grimleaves if they drop any. Continue running through the rooms around the crystalline Hunlift until you have 7 of each armor material and a weapon frame. As you harvest the 7th ore or bark, drop the related tool to free up some inventory space. Also try to get 1 to 2 Grimleaves either from monsters or by picking them. Once you have all 21 armor materials, a weapon frame, and a Grimleaf or 2 if you found them, you should have at least 110 crystal shards. But if you have less than 80, kill a few more monsters until you have at least that many. If you've got 80 plus crystal shards along with everything else, run back to the homeroom and drop all your armor materials in front of the crystal singing bowl. If you got a teleport crystal as a drop, feel free to teleport instead to save some time. Now go ahead and click on the bowl and create your weapon of choice. Go with your highest level combat style or whichever one you prefer if they're about the same. I'd recommend the bow or staff though, as those allow you to attack monsters as you enter and run through a room, and they're easier to safe spot with. Click the weapon again to upgrade it from basic to attuned, the middle tier of items inside the Gauntlet. Lastly, create 3 empty vials and you're good to go. If you got really unlucky with crystal shards and you don't have enough to craft 3 vials, just make the remainder after you finish the next trip. On this second trip out, you shouldn't have any armor materials in your inventory. Our goal on this run is to find 2 mini-bosses and finish gathering resources along the way. We want a total of 3 grim leaves and as many raw paddlefish as our inventory can hold, which is around 18 to 20. Head out in the opposite direction of the boss room as that's the shortest distance to the perimeter of the dungeon. You can open the connected rooms in any order you like, but I prefer to start on one side and work my way toward the other 2 center rooms that may contain mini-bosses. I also open the inside rooms and collect resources at the same time. This way, you're not wasting time by backtracking. Be careful when opening these 3 center outer doors though, because a mini-boss could be waiting on the other side. They can smack you pretty hard if your prayer isn't up in time. Kill the mini-bosses you find until you have attachments for 2 different weapons, and make sure to grab a weapon frame if you never got a second one. As you're running around, use your pestle and mortar to crush 3 sets of shards into 30 crystal dust. We won't need the pestle and mortar after this, so go ahead and drop it. If you see any fishing nodes, fill up your vials in them so you can add the grim leaves and crystal dust to save some inventory space. If you didn't find 2 mini-bosses, head back to the row next to the perimeter and make your way to the next group of 3 rooms. Sometimes you can get really unlucky, but just keep checking rooms until you get the attachments you want. On this hunt for mini-bosses, you should also be getting a 3rd grim leaf and making the potions, and filling your inventory with paddlefish. Dropping a paddlefish and your scepter once you have everything you need will allow you to carry 2 extra fish. Alright, once you've managed to get 2 attachments for the weapons you want, check your supplies. You should have at least 380 crystal shards and 18 raw paddlefish, as well as the 3 finished Egnial potions. If you're lacking any of these supplies, explore the inner rooms until you've got them. If your supplies meet the checklist, teleport home using your crystal teleport seed. Head over to the crystal singing bowl and drop most of your raw paddlefish. Click your tuned weapon to upgrade it to perfected and craft your other weapon that you've got the piece for. Once you've created the 2 perfected weapons, pick up the armor materials that you dropped earlier and craft attuned armor. Lastly, pick up all your raw paddlefish off that dirty floor and cook it on the range. Now sit back and watch as your character rapidly cooks all the food without you needing to spam click. When those are done, you can drop your remaining crystal shards. Double check that you've now got 3 Egnial potions, 18 plus cooked paddlefish, 2 perfected weapons, and a full set of attuned armor. We're now ready to fight the crystal in Hunlif. A couple tips first though. If you're using a crystal staff, use your other weapon first as long as the boss is not praying against it. This way you can use Mystic Might or Augury for attacking him once he switches prayers, and it'll also give you some extra defense against his magic attacks. Also, if you've got time to spare, wait until the Hunlif walks toward a wall or corner instead of barging in when he's in the middle of the room. His position makes a huge difference throughout the fight because you have way less room to escape the tornadoes if he's standing in the center. Alright, time to get in there. Turn on Protect from Ranged and equip whatever weapon the boss isn't praying against. Enter the room when he's away from the middle and head to one of the Phase 1 safe spots. And the rest is easy. Just count to 4 and switch prayers, and switch weapons after every 6th attack of yours while running like hell from fiery crystal tornadoes of death and staying off the floor made of lava without running underneath the boss. You got this! Now you should be fully equipped with the knowledge to take on the gauntlet. So get in there and go have some fun. Once you get the rhythm down and you can handle the boss pretty well, you can try more advanced strategies. You can start making just the basic armor, which only requires 3 of each resource and 120 crystal shards in total. You can also make only 2 Egnial potions and be perfectly fine. Once you're feeling confident in those, you can completely ditch the armor. Just make sure you fill up your inventory with fish because the boss hits you really consistently and everything in the room does more damage, so you'll be eating a lot. The fights take a bit longer though because of the loss in accuracy and the fact that you're constantly eating. In fact, it might even be faster overall to just make tier 1 armor for that plus 166 ranged and mage bonus. Actually, let me test that real quick. Okay, so I just did 30 gauntlet completions, 10 each for tier 2, tier 1, and no armor to find out what the best option is for fastest completion times. To reduce the amount of variables, I used my main account which already had 99 ranged and magic, and went with the perfected crystal bow and staff every time. Here's the data for all the runs with full attuned armor. Averaging all the times, we get a total time average of 8 minutes 41 seconds, prep time of 6 minutes 41 seconds, and fight time of 1 minute 59 seconds. For full basic armor, the total time average is 7 minutes 55 seconds, prep time is 5 minutes 37, and fight time is 2 minutes and 18 seconds. Without any armor, we shave off almost another 30 seconds in total time at 7 minutes 26 seconds. Naturally, prep time is going to be shorter as well at 5:01. Fight time went up a little bit versus the basic armor times, but you still save an average of 22 seconds over tier 1 armor by not wearing any at all. So there we have it. Each time you go down a tier of armor, you reduce the total time per run, with no armor being the best. The fight times go up a little bit, but not by very much. Keep in mind though that I did these test runs on a 45 defense account, so your times are likely to be faster than mine if you have piety, rigor, or augury. There are a couple more strategies for minimizing completion times. One is the redemption method. Basically, to minimize tick loss from eating paddlefish, you can use redemption to heal you a little bit. But this strategy is kind of hard to pull off, and it's only useful if you're low on prayer points because you don't want to keep chugging Agnial potions. Also, you have to be above the Hunlift's max hit with your armor setup. Here's a table of the damage the boss does with the different armor sets. A better strategy is to use what's called the 5-to-1 method. Instead of spending time finding 2 desirable mini-bosses to create 2 perfected weapons, you only make 1 perfected weapon, preferably the bow, and a basic or attuned staff. Since the Hunlift switches prayers on every 6th off-prayer attack of yours, the goal is to hit the boss 5 times with your bow, and then switch to another weapon for the 6th attack. You need to have all 3 combat styles for this method because you'll alternate between punching the boss and using the staff after every group of 5 bow shots. Now that we don't have to count the Hunlift's attacks anymore, this method is a lot easier and more viable. One super advanced thing you can do is Wooks walk the tornadoes so you don't have to run from them. But I'm not really sure how to do that in the Gauntlet, and I don't think it's worth doing unless you're going for the record completion time. Well, that's all the methods that I know of to maximize your completions per hour. I'm not really sure how the heck somebody managed to get a 2 minute 39 second completion time, but he or she most likely used a combination of all the methods I went over, has a maxed account with rigor, and got really lucky. Once you're able to consistently beat the Gauntlet without armor, you're probably ready for the Corrupted Gauntlet. It's a heck of a lot more challenging, but the rewards are easily twice as good. Speaking of rewards, I recorded all of it from the 30 Gauntlet runs in case anyone wanted to see what the loot is like. Well, that pretty much wraps up everything. I hope this guide answered all your questions that you could ever have about the Gauntlet, but feel free to ask in the comments if I missed anything. This video has taken me an insane amount of time to make, so if you guys could drop a like, subscribe, and let me know what you thought of the video, that would be awesome. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.